Welcome to another episode
Hi,
of
Gerry.
Buyouts, Business, and Bourbon. We're very, very excited for today's episode. My longtime friend, Adam Margolis, is here to talk about his journey to selling his business to private equity. So we have a lot to talk about today. Thanks for coming on, Adam.
You're welcome, Gerry. I'm excited to be here. Finally.
Yes, we've
This is
we've talked
great.
about this for a little while, but your transaction is still relatively fresh. So we wanted to make sure
It
that
is.
everything was all good. You have a lot to talk about, the transition of getting to the point to sell, and now you've been several months after your sale. So you could talk a little bit
That's
about
right.
what it's like post sale and what the feeling is for post sale. Obviously, a lot of business owners go through a lot of changes once they sell their business. So there's a lot to talk about today.
That's right.
So why don't we
That's
start
great.
out with a
Yeah.
little bit about, your history of growing L&M and a little bit about your partnership with Lenny and kind of how you grew the business over a period of 20 plus years, correct?
Yeah,
So
that's
you
right.
kind of, what that looks like and tell us a little bit about your business, and then we could talk about kind of what happened from the point of that growth.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. And happy to be here. This is fun. It's worth telling like a 2-minute prehistory, which is I graduated Columbia University in a dual program back in 1993 and fell into pharmaceutical marketing and communications, which is, the general business that I've been in ever since, and took a liking to live event marketing. And so in 1993, that looked a lot different than it does in 2026 for sure, and entered the job market. And some point in the late 90s, my business partner Lenny and I can't quite pin down the date, but sometime in the 97, 98 timeframe, we met. At a large agency in New Jersey that was transitioning from being privately held to actually going to a strategic firm. We were relatively junior employees, but sort of learning what was going on there, and we became fast friends. And we used to commute together and go out to lunch together all the time. And we worked on a couple of shared accounts. He was on the medical side, and I was more of the accounts project direction side. And we used to say, even back then in 97, 98, boy, wouldn't this be fun to do for ourselves one day? We could do this. We were really young at the time and pretty naive, but that was the dream. Fast forward to 2005, we were working together again at an agency in New Jersey, and identified an opportunity to launch our firm with a client, which is a nice way to start a business, is that you're not just saying, here we are, we're just going straight into the work, and kind of didn't even focus on the here we are. There was like one article that came out about us in one of the trade rags back then. Excuse me. And we just got to work. We hired a couple of people right away. Betty, who was with us for the full 20 years, and a number of other employees who joined pretty quickly afterwards, right here in Scotch Plains, famously down the street from Darby Road and from CVS and all of that, overlooking the downtown area of
Did you need
Scotch
much
Plains. And we
capital,
just set
Adam,
out
in the
to work.
beginning? Did you
Hmm?
need much
What's that?
capital in the beginning?
We didn't. We put in a little bit of money to travel to see our clients. And the famous sort of story back then was like one day, a really large check nearing seven figures kind of showed up in the mailbox as our first payment from our first client. And we were thrilled. We had enough capital at that point to pay ourselves, to get to do the projects that we were doing, and to hire a couple of people. And so that was the late winter of 2025 into the beginning of 2026. And we set out to slowly grow from there, to be intentional in the people that we were hiring, to try to take on new accounts. But especially in that first 12, 18 months in business, we really focused on a single account. We did end up bringing in, towards the end of our first year, our second account, and started to grow the capabilities that we had. Lenny really focused on medical strategy and medical writing and medical direction, and I was focused on just getting the projects done, interfacing with the clients on a regular basis. We traveled to Milwaukee, Wisconsin about every 3 or 4 weeks for a year plus, just putting all of our attention behind this really important client. Um, and so that's how we got started. And even back then, with the experience that we had working together for a couple of different firms, we said, look, this is going to take some time. But I think we can both agree that the long-term goal is to try to build something that's worth something in the marketplace. And that would be, and back then we had no idea how that would happen, but that would be acquired at some point. I mean, I know that that's the purpose of this, of your podcast largely, is to talk to owners who get acquired. And even back in 2006, 2007, we were looking and saying, hey, let's just keep growing. Let's see what this thing will be worth one day, and let's grow with that intention. And then 20 years passed. We had a couple of hockey stick year growths where we thought, oh, this is the time, and it wasn't. And there were a lot of, I think, for many business owners, and also folks in pharma in particular, there were a ton of headwinds over the last 20 years. I know you and I have talked about some of those.
So, Adam, in your growth phase, I know it was important for you to bring on Scott, who's your partial CFO, not your full-time
That's right.
CFO. And I know having a financial person was instrumental in part of your growth. Do you want to, I think some of the listeners that struggle with not being able to hire a full-time CFO and be able to
Yeah.
grow because, your focus is pharma, Lenny's focus is pharma, clients, client service, bringing in new clients, but growing the business and keeping an eye on the financials and just, revenues and EBITDA and all that. Why
Yeah.
don't you tell us a little bit about, finding Scott and then him being obviously an instrumental part of your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were about 10 years in, and we were growing very rapidly. We were at that point about 50 plus employees. We had moved, and we were considering a third move, or we had moved the third time, and to bigger and bigger office space. And we were saying, all right, well, we're 10 years in. I was still relatively young. But it seemed like, boy, this revenue mix looks really interesting. We think we're profitable. Like our accountant's telling us you look good. And we love our accountant, but he's not a CFO. And so we went to an investment bank. These guys call a lot
Mhm.
when you're a privately held firm. And I know that whoever, listens to your podcast and is an owner receives a ton of emails and LinkedIn's and phone calls, and you mostly ignore them. And so we said, well, why don't we take one of these calls? So we went into New York City. We were all proud of ourselves, very puffed up. We looked very nice. We had this sort of report, P&L report that ran out of our QuickBooks system, and we were like, hey, clearly this is a business that's ready to be sold. They said, do you have a CFO? And we were like, no, we could never feel like we could afford it. We didn't know anybody that knew the event space in particular, kind of all of those things. We're like, no, we don't have a CFO. They're like, you need a CFO. We have a guy for you. And so they introduced us to Scott Cardman, who you have gotten to know very well over the years as well, who had live event experience. It was a little different than pharma, but it was event based CFO type work. So it was highly specific. We knew he would understand the burdensome nature of the the pass through dollars that we had. We were really acting like a bank for most of our clients, and he could help us with the live event side of things, negotiating hotel contracts better, kind of all this stuff. And he started on a part-time basis, and frankly was part-time the entire time he was with us. There were times when he was most time, when he was giving us 3 or 4 or even 5 days a week. And there were times when he faded into the background and we would talk once a week and he would work with our controller and kind of keep an eye on the books. It's another critical point was we moved the person who was in the controller position to a more specified compliance control position, and we onboarded a new controller with agency experience as well. And so the combination of Scott and Amy was really critical to managing the business better. And then we hit one of those headwinds, which was we just got unlucky. I don't know whether it was an eye off the ball kind of situation, if it was um, just the industry telling us you've gotten too big, or you're just not paying close enough attention. And we lost a couple of really major accounts right after Scott joined us. And we went from about 70 employees to about 20 employees in a year. And that was tough. And we were really evaluating like what are we doing here? And ended up digging in, landing a very significant account the next year, and sort of clawing our way back over 10 years. When Scott joined, we thought we'll get this business sold within a year or two. He very rapidly realized that we were not in a position, even before some of this disaster happened, to sell the company. We weren't diversified enough. We were way too lumped with one client. And then had 10 years worth of work making sure that we continued to be smart about the business and to grow the business back to where we. Um, I get approached now after having sold the company by a lot of people who say, how'd you do it? What's the secret? What was it? What was it that put you over the edge? And the first thing I always say to everybody is, do you have a CFO,
Yeah.
even if they're just a day or two a week? Because if you don't, a CFO who understands that one day you want to sell this business or change the structure of this business in some way, because if you don't, you can't get
So you
there.
always have to have
You
your
can't.
eye on the exit, even though you're still in growth mode. Your eye is always on someday you're going to do this. So you need some financial support.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you need the reporting, you need the structure. And even if Scott joined us 10 years ago and it was 15 years more until we sold the business, you need just better reporting. You just need, even the accounts you're talking to as they're getting bigger. Do you have a CFO? Can we have it? We need to conduct an audit. Well, how do you do an audit without a CFO? And so he was critical for the decade. We couldn't spend every single day wringing our hands and saying, "Gosh, are we going to sell tomorrow? Are we going to sell tomorrow? Are we going to sell tomorrow?" We had to focus on the
Yeah,
business,
that makes sense.
and so he was able to take the financial reporting and analysis burden off of me. And I'm not a finance person. I don't have a finance degree. I don't have an MBA. I graduated with a degree in modern European history, and so. I couldn't do that other than day to day, like running payroll and approving check runs. I just don't have the mind for the detailed finances like he does. And so we needed that. And then as we hit our next growth phase, starting around the COVID time, he was able to start to say, okay, I feel like we're, you know, 36 months or 48 months if we continue on this track from getting you guys to your goal. I think we're 36 or 24 months from it. Then it was like, guys, I think this is the time. And so
So it's a moving
that
target.
was.
So Adam, how did it so once you come to the conclusion that you're within a certain period of time, because business owners ask us all the time, you don't wait till you're ready to sell till you start talking to investment bankers. You try to do it,
That's right.
several years, up to several years before you actually sell, to
Yes.
start having these conversations, educate yourself on the exit options, right? So how does that look when you start inviting and meeting with investment banks and trying to determine which investment bank you're going to hire to do the
Yeah.
process of going out and shopping your deal, right? So how does that
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that investment, hiring the investment bank and what goes on there?
Yeah, sure. So that's also kind of a funny, like little story, is that when the deal was done, or we were deep into the deal, my investment banker that we ended up hiring, said, I have to, I really wish I could show you the file that's back in my office on L&M Healthcare. Um, I said, why? What's so funny? He's like, do you realize how long we've been talking? I said, no, Ed, I have no idea. He's like, it's over 10 years
Wow.
that we've been talking on a semi-regular basis. I still have paper files around my office at times, and things like notes that I shove in things. He's like, it's this thick. And we've had these conversations either quarterly or half yearly or even yearly for the last decade. And I think it just sort of speaks to that identifying somebody where you think maybe, all right, this is the time that they're gonna go and we're gonna get this done. But keeping them engaged in your business and understanding what you're doing when the crummy times happen, why the timeline got pushed off, is important. And so, yeah, we talked to a couple of different investment firms with an interest in pharma marketing services. I think finding an investment banker that really understands your space, it's obvious, I would say, but it
Mhm.
needs to be said. Ours is very niche. Pharma marketing services, most of the world hasn't really heard of, other than the commercials you see on TV, which, by the way, we didn't ever get involved with any of that work. Um, and so to really say, we do MedCom, we do mostly live events, we're in the speakers bureau space and the technology space. Do you get that? Yes, of course, and sort of looking at I think they call them their tombstones
Mhm.
and saying, oh,
Yep.
right, they sold that company and they sold that company and they have these kind of connections. That's great. We ended up going with a very boutique firm, Excel Partners, this guy named Ed So, who became frankly a friend over the years and was just a really good guy that handles just a few deals a year and really, really acutely understood our space and the pressures that we were under. And he was really kind about it. He checked in. And if I told him, Ed, not now, he'd disappear for 6 months. If I had something interesting to say, I would pick up the phone and call him or send him a text. And, he would analyze it and sort of help me think about it. Also got to know Scott very well, obviously, very much so during the deal, but we introduced Scott to Ed very early, and Ed really tracked our business over time. So that when I sat down with him for lunch with good reporting, with CFO approved reporting and gap accounting and all of that. And I said, sort of like, Ed, do you think this is the time that we should be taking a look at the marketplace? Because we feel like it is. We really suddenly feel like, boy, we've hit this period where we're on the rise and we're feeling good about the business. And he looked at it for a couple of minutes over lunch. And he's like, I won't use the exact terms to keep it PG, but he's like, yes, it's time to sell the
Yeah.
company. Um, and and so we got started.
So that starting process basically says, okay, you're open to looking at private equity. You ended up going private equity, but are you open to a strategic, a larger
Yeah,
medical advertising firm buying you? So he was looking
that's
at
right.
both areas for you.
That's right. We ended up selling the company in October of 2025. Launch happened in like February of 2025. And then it takes a little time to iron out the legal agreements with the banker and get the lawyers involved and the accountants involved. So there's a period of like a month or so where you're just kind of negotiating the little points. And then it was time to build the target list and build the book. And so that happened in the early spring of 2025, where he came back to us and said, okay, here's my proposed list. I deal with these people all the time. I'm having phone calls with everybody on this list on a regular basis. I know where they're at in terms of are they acquiring, are they in the marketplace, what's going on in this world of yours. Take a look at the list. Tell me any that are an absolute no-go, which, companies we had bad competition with in the past, companies that we didn't like their reputation, whatever it was, just scrape them off the list. and then tell me like feel wise where you want to be. And so Lenny and I took a look at the list, and we decided, I think there were 50 or 60 companies on the list initially. We cut that down to 25 and said basically focus on companies that are probably private equity funded, um, which are looking to add us as a service to an existing growing company. There's the whole concept of going to private equity directly and saying, make a major investment in our company and help us grow as the centerpiece.
Hmm.
And I think what Lenny and I decided, both based on the amount of time we've been in this business, the thing that we know about our business, the thing that we know about other businesses just like ours. And I had lunches with these people, and some of these people are friends of mine through the industry who took private equity money directly in order to grow their entity to be that centerpiece of something that grows bigger. I didn't want that. I really wanted to focus on a firm that was looking to add the service that we have to their portfolio of companies. And so the list got a little bit narrower again. The strategic thing, the Omnicoms, the
Hmm.
IPGs, the WPPs, all of that. And I think as we're seeing right now in the latest big merger, we said don't even go there. I don't think we're big enough for to add on, and I'm not going back into that environment either. We had the luxury of being a little bit picky, right? We were a company that was still growing, that was showing strong revenue, strong EBITDA, good reporting. We felt confident about it. The service that we offered is still really relevant in the industry. People are leaning into what we do even more, even though they were counting this business out 20 years ago. People are still pushing, the industry is still pushing on this work. And so he said, let's focus there. And that was most of the spring. And then the machinations of what private equity does, I don't know if anybody's that interested in it, but it becomes a process, right? Going out, you're a really good banker who's really well networked, going and saying with like a blinded one pager, saying, this is the company
Hmm.
that is going to be out there. Are you interested in that? So then that filters the list down even.
But what I remember is you had a decent amount of interest, right, based upon your revenues and your
Yeah,
EBITDA, and that your business is a little bit different, right? So I think there
yeah,
was a lot of what I remember. There was a lot of interest. There was
there
quite a
was.
bunch of PE firms that had an interest, and obviously everybody
Yeah, there
wants
were.
to be at the lowest price they can buy you at, right? So
Yeah,
I'm sure it gets interest
yeah,
comes
there
down to
was.
how much they're willing to pay and things like that, but the list,
Yeah,
what was the manageable number that you kinda met with when you started doing the interviews? Was it 3 or is it more than 3?
it was more. It was a two-phase, well, it was actually a three-phase process of like, do do you have an interest in this firm? Yes or no? Do you want to sign an NDA to get more? Yes or no? Then I think a dozen plus companies said sign the NDA and got the book, a much more extensive PowerPoint with backup on what this business was about, more detailed financials. I believe at that point, blinded clients still, because there is that element of competition and all of that that you have to be careful of. Do you want to meet with these guys? And so um, we then filtered the companies like, no, no, like they're not serious. We didn't do a lot of filtering, but cut down. Then over the spring and summer, early part of the summer, we did 30-minute Zooms with companies that were really interested in talking to us. And just, a series of questions on their end, a bunch of questions from us to get an understanding of why they were interested in us. And, some basic questions on capabilities and some of the financials and all of that, although we didn't engage in a really deep financial conversation until deeper in the process. We did a number of those. I frankly I don't remember, but it was quite a few. And those were Zoom. They were 45 minutes, 30, 45 minutes, an hour at the most. Great.
What were
Then it's a
what were the things that narrowed
yeah.
it down, Adam, to get to, like, the top 3? Like, what were the things that was it valuation? Was it terms? Was it earnouts and rollover equity? I mean, all those
Yeah.
things?
It was a little bit of everything. It was a little bit of um what are they interest what's the offer, that the
Mhm.
potential offer here? What's the letter of intent, the letter of interest look like? Um So saying, "Oh, all right, like they're undervaluing us," or this feels like the right value. Um, there was also just a feel to it, just like, is this because there was one firm that it was like, yeah, they're all they want is the clients, right? They're not interested in our tech, not interested so much in our people. It's probably just like a quick integration, add the clients to the roster, move on. And so that didn't feel right. And then of course, there's just the bottom line financials. Like, does this offer look really good or not? Is this something that after 20 years of building a business, Lenny and I are interested in dealing with? And so the list narrowed, and the final meetings were half-day meetings. Those were in the summertime. Um, face to face with a meal, which I thought was really important, an important part of the process, to not only go back and forth on capabilities and why you should join us and why we should join you, and here's all the financials, and sort of hearing from the private equity people in the room and the management team, and a deeper understanding of what we can do and what our clients look like and all of that, but then having a social event, to have a drink, a bourbon, and have a nice meal together and say, like, can we work with these people? Like, all of them included some amount of time that Lenny and I were going to have to work for the firm. And so, like, do I see myself an employee of this firm? And so those happened in June. We took final offers, bids, in August. You and I were together at the beach when we got a couple really fun offers, and then we decided to narrow it down to the one company that ended up acquiring us, and we can talk about that next, but we did the whole sort of diligence process through from August until October.
Just before, when you chose them, how important was it for a commitment from them that they were gonna keep your employee base? I know you care about your employees and your executive team. Was that an important part of the conversation, or was it a little bit of an unknown? Because obviously we know private
It,
equity cares about the return on investment, and labor
that's right.
and expense is a big part of that.
It was. A lot of our people have been with us for a long time, and they're skilled in a way that's different than other pharma agency service level people are. They have to have event planning experience and compliance experience, customer service. There's a range of really key skills that these folks have, and a commitment to our firm. Like, they, many of them were around for many years. We just didn't have high turnover over the years. And so it was extremely important to understand, like, where does this fit? Is this and one of the final list of amongst the final group of like four companies that we were talking to, it felt a little like, yeah, they're going to become part of this bigger speakers bureau, and probably we're going to get rid of your technology because we just put a bunch of money into ours. And yeah, they're going to have to learn our way and the whole thing. And it just didn't feel as right. What I liked about Finger Paint Group, which is the group that acquired us, was that we were going to be this brand new division. They acknowledged they didn't completely We didn't completely fit the agency model, that it was something new and a cool offering that the business could have to round out their medical communications business. And that we were going to be, in as much as you're free in one of these environments, we were going to be able to run our business the way we wanted to. Obviously, with constraints, obviously, with much more oversight and all of those things. That's just an accepted part of what this is. Um, but that they weren't going to tell us how to actually do our business. We were going to tell them how our business is done. And then over time, figure out how do we make money on this and how do we make more money and how do we grow it. And so that felt good about this group, that I was going to remain in place as I think I told you the greatest demotion of my career from CEO to managing director. Perfect. All the people staying in place, all the kind of client structures and all of the ways that we do our business staying in place. The investment we were making in technology moved over to their CapEx table. They were going to finish paying for this thing. It was a multi-million dollar project to upgrade our technology. That goes into CapEx. My tech guy, who was with us for a year at that point and had been neck deep in rebuilding our tech, staying on board. Like, this is great and you get paid. Okay, like, so then we sort of said, right, this is the obvious choice for who we pick.
No, that makes good sense. So tell us a little bit about that due diligence process, 'cause what I remember is it also was a relatively short process. In
It
other words,
was. It
once
was.
you chose them and they chose you, they wanted to close relatively soon, I will say, because sometimes these could be months long of going through your books and making sure that they're happy with the
Yeah.
financials.
I think that was the thing that probably gave us the greatest pause at the beginning, because despite the fact that we had a CFO, an incredible attorney with Brian, and an amazing law firm with Elliott and Sachs behind him, um, we were still a very small team. It was those three guys, our controller, myself, the bankers, and now we're this small company who is going to have to deal with a private equity firm, a M&A firm, a law firm, an accounting firm, a board, all of these things. Um, you know, we were a high school team playing the NFL, or the playing, anybody else. And so, you didn't like that joke?
I did. I think it came I think the, high school team playing the NFLs were a little rough. That's a rough, analogy. I don't think it was quite that,
It
brutal.
wasn't quite that bad, and they were great. Our team was incredible. We were just small.
Yeah.
And they said they wanted to close in 45 days. And we were like, wait, what? 45 days? Like, isn't this a 60 to 90 day process? Maybe even longer? Nope, 45 days. That's what we want. And we basically hit that goal. But everything in my life, Lenny's life, Scott's life, all of our supporting professional players, everything else was put on hold. And that's all we did for 45 days. I stupidly didn't cancel a vacation that my wife and I had for celebrating our 30th anniversary. I should have postponed that. I ended up working most of my vacation in Greece, making my wife miserable and me in the process as well. But yeah, it was really hard. I will say the diligence amnesia has not quite kicked in yet. That's why I think this is a good time to do this podcast, because I have perspective on it, and it was 6, 7 months, 8 months ago now at this point, but it was really hard. And if we didn't have such incredible professionals with us, if I didn't have a CFO for 10 years who understood this business inside out, if I didn't have a banker for 10 years who understood our business, not only the business, but our business for 10 years, and his team, And if we didn't have an accountant who had literally been with us from day one, he set up our QuickBooks in 2005 and has grown as an accountant, and his firm has grown not necessarily because of us, but the backing of Saks behind us and Brian Keeler, who is an incredible M&A attorney. We wouldn't have made it.
So putting the
Simply wouldn't.
team, because we stress this all the time with business owners, is putting the team around you, especially with, in your case, a long-term team, right? They've been with you for a while. You weren't bringing on all these new players in the team, right?
Right.
So you had the pleasure of basically having these long-term relationships, right? That many people don't
Hmm.
have. You have to bring in people to get a deal done. So that probably worked out very positively for your due diligence experience.
It really did. It simply in I don't even think in 90 days it would have happened
Yeah.
if we didn't have a team that knew our business down to the penny, and how we and the subtleties of it, and how, oh God, like everything from accruals to payroll to dealing with specific clients to specific issues and MSAs for specific clients. All those things our guys, our team, had at their fingertips and understood. And when I was lost in a conversation, just didn't have an answer for somebody that could fill in the blanks. Um, like I said, as much as we were really had set our minds at selling our company 20 years ago when we started it, it's not like I went and got an MBA in the meantime or became an
Yep.
accountant in the meantime or have a law degree in the meantime. I worked on the business.
No,
I
you
worked
rely on
on
others.
pushing and building and meeting people and ensuring a good product for our client.
Yeah. Was there any surprises during that due diligence process, before you ended up closing? I mean, I know there's some probably I think there's some adjustments to EBITDA and things that always happen.
Yeah, it does. And there's a lot of heated negotiation, shall I
Yeah.
say. There's a lot of potholes that you break an ankle in before, like, you're stepping in that pothole and you realize like your ankle's broken on this one and you're gonna have to negotiate around it. Um, it and in 45 days it seems to happen every single day. Like, what did I wake up to today? And wake up to is what happens because these professionals w- keep on going. At a certain point at 1 o'clock in the morning when I can't see anymore, and I've had one too many of those bourbons reading these documents. I'm just like, I got to go to bed. They still work until 3 o'clock in the morning, and the people on the West Coast, they don't care. So it's nearly constant that there's some sort of, well, we're going to have to take a look at this because of this. And it was happening until uh, about 48 hours before we closed,
That's amazing.
was
Yeah.
another like, what about this?
You
And
feel
oh, when did that happen?
you almost feel like you're at a disadvantage because these are professional buyers of businesses, right?
Yeah,
They do this every day. They buy businesses
yeah,
and you feel like this is the one time you're doing it. So you feel like
right,
I'm the rookie and this is the professional. And now you feel like the high school
right.
team playing the NFL team.
And I guess that's what I meant by the high school team was all of our professionals incredibly experienced, but as a unit, you are just outmanned and outgunned. I mean, the size of the M&A team alone on the buying side was massive. I would get on these calls and there'd be like four of us and 20 of them.
Yeah. No.
Now, thankfully, they were super organized and they had sort of their spokespeople, and it would be like, let's have a tech diligence call. Let's have a customer service. Let's have a compliance. Let's have a
Yeah.
financial. Like, and everybody had their role, but it's a lot of people, you know,
Well, you feel like I
and
feel
like
like the
clearly
analogy that you
texting
went
on the
through,
side.
I feel like you ran the marathon, right? You're running a marathon and you're getting up to mile, whatever, 24, 23, near the end of the race. And then they start crushing you with stuff. And you're so
Yeah,
tired from the marathon that at the end of the marathon, you really don't have the wherewithal to argue anymore. And the heated discussions probably like you're almost like throwing up the white flag. And
Yeah.
by this point, you've incurred a decent amount of expense, I imagine, through the process between attorneys,
Yes.
accountants, and then all the time that you
Yes.
spent, the opportunity cost of time,
That's right.
right?
Yeah, I mean, I like that analogy a lot. It's like you've run 23 miles, and then suddenly there's one of those Spartan mud courses that happens from mile 23 to mile 26, and you're expected to climb ropes, run under electrified wire, have mud thrown in your face, have somebody grabbing your shirt from behind and pulling you backwards. And it's like, but we need to get over there, and I've run most of the marathon already here, man. Like what it was, I love that. It was really hard. Now,
All right.
every
So
situation
you
is
get to the
unique.
finish line, you close
We
your
do.
deal, you have a
We
nice
do.
dinner, celebrate with your bankers, right? After the deal closes. What is the feeling you get when you've done it? And does it feel like you've sold your baby? I mean, like you're giving away your baby. So like I know it's kind of
Yeah.
a strange feeling that now you have a boss. You've never had a boss for those 20 years. So like what is it
Yeah.
how does it work when you hit that finish line and then you're right past the finish line? Because I know you've had some time to think about this.
Yeah. I've had some time to get some perspective, and I would say that the first few months were very hard for me personally. And it still has required a lot of adjustment to my approach and to um, how I interact with people and how I interact with my bosses and with this firm, I would say it's been overall very positive. They remain Finger Paint Group, like remains a great company with great people, and on a personal level, they're really decent and wonderful human beings. Mercifully, I don't deal much with private equity and the top line financial stuff anymore. I have to produce in my division and manage to a much tighter bottom line than I had to before. As Scott likes to say, if we didn't do as well one year over the next, we figured out how to make you and Lenny whole so that, you could take care of your families and that we could keep people employed. And maybe it was a flat year. Maybe it was dead from 2008 to 2009 or 2010 to 11. Maybe it was just like a flat year. You didn't really care. Like people were paid and you were paid and the clients were satisfied and you were focusing on the year after.
I mean, do you feel
It
like there's
doesn't
a
work
little
that
bit
way in this.
less responsibility, a little bit of a relief in some ways that you're not as
For sure.
responsible for the livelihood of all your employees and keeping the business going and making sure clients are
That's right.
recurring and all that, right?
I famously never, and I know that a lot of entrepreneurs feel the same way, almost never slept Sunday night. I would try to go to bed at a reasonable time, knowing that the week was starting. My brain would start going into overdrive about like the most random things. Like most of the time for us, it was cash management because of the nature of what we do. There's so much money that flows in and out of the entity to pay for events, to pay for honoraria, all of that stuff was like, do we have enough money in the bank Monday morning? Like we're gonna have to do a check run, and oh, by the way, all of our employees get paid on Thursday, and this and that and that. Do we have enough money? And I'm doing like accounting calculations, laying in bed on a Sunday night at 11 o'clock. Stupid, but that's just what we do,
Right.
right? There's an example for all of this. For us, it was always financial and cash management. I don't, I don't have that anymore. you know,
Coming from the history major, that's probably not a fun task on a
Oh,
Sunday night.
brutal. Like our Amex bill, I get this call. Our Amex bill is $1.2 million this month. Like our clients better pay, one of those kind of things. And so those issues, mercifully, are far less these days. I don't worry about cash management at all. That's simply not my problem anymore. And I can advise on it, but this is a company that is that acquired us that is 20 times as big as we were at our biggest. And so, um, you know, there's resources, they're resourced differently than we are. The things I focus on are staff utilization, landing new business, ensuring that the business that we have is profitable. And this is like profitable on a monthly basis versus say quarterly or even yearly, the way we were dealing with it before. And so really resourcing properly and going out and developing new business are my biggest focus. And now we've got some like cool AI initiatives and stuff like that that have just been personally interesting to me. So I've gotten involved in that as well.
That's great.
But yeah, the day-to-day stuff like that, after 20 years of doing it, it's just nice not to.
That's great. So, Adam, as we kind of approach the end of your story, right? Now you're working. You've explained what you're doing. Now your role has changed a bit. What advice? What are the kind of two or three things you have advice for people considering an exit? Like, what would be your top couple things for them to really think about? As
Well, number one is have a CFO. I've said it twice
Yep,
already, or however many times. You have to have somebody who understands the financial side of your business for not 6 months before you want to go, but for a period of time. We happen to have it for 10 years. I don't think it was didn't think it was going to be that at the time, but so it was. Um, get involved with the the people that are going to help you sell your business early as well. If it's to private equity or one of these types of environments and it requires an investment banker, get to know that person, not just like start taking those calls a year before and like reach out, just have the call and say, does this look like a business that one day, whether it's now or 5 years from now, is going to be worth something to the industry? And they'll be really honest because they do want to make money on your transaction. That's what motivates them. But they want to have a reputation that says, I'm bringing good companies to the marketplace and, companies that are going to impact the acquirers in a way. And so, yeah, I would say get involved with that
great.
and have a lot of patience, whatever it is that gets you through the process itself, like lean in on that. I exercise a lot. Um, I try to talk a lot and talk to resources like you
Yep,
throughout the process. You and I spoke about this from the very beginning. I told you this was happening and to have sort of those outside the business unit itself, resources, family members, friends, whatever it is that you can talk to.
good. That's all great advice. And it was really, I think, a fascinating story and a fascinating process. And I'm sure there's parts of it you'd love to do again, and parts of this you wouldn't do want to do again. So,
Yeah, I mean, looking back on 20 years, there's lots of things I would have done
no, I
differently
mean
in
the
20 years.
process
That's a
of
whole,
selling. This whole
yeah,
due
that's a whole other
diligence and
podcast though.
interviews.
Yeah, for sure. For the last year of my life, there's some things I would do different. And then there was those things that's just like, wow, like this went right. And I had to trust the process and understand that at some points it did feel like it. I mean, we even put it at the beginning. It was like, is this going to close? 50-50. For 48 hours before, is this actually going to happen? 40-60, 24 hours later, 70-30, we're done. It's a lot of that last minute stuff. So there's things I would do different, but overall I'm satisfied
So,
with it,
so now,
with
now
what,
the
with how
question
it
really
went.
is, what kind of bourbon? Let's talk a little bit about your post-sale bourbon drinking, and even pre-sale. But
Yeah.
but I know post-sale, I know you indulged in celebration. Like, tell us about your favorite
Yeah.
bourbon drinks. I know you're a drink master, so like you make drinks as well as
I
just drink
do.
bourbon
The
straight.
COVID thing was like, I like to, when we were all home, I even did a couple of online bartending things as like a charity stuff for our local synagogue. And so I like making drinks. I think my drink taste has gotten simpler and simpler and simpler over time. I'm like a simple old fashioned guy, simple Manhattan guy. There's a drink called a Martinez, which is almost like a twist on an old fashioned or drink like that, but using gin. I like gin martinis. Really simple. I bought all like a cabinet full of ingredients to make different things, and
course.
they're all collecting dust.
Yeah.
To me, it's just keep it simple. I tell my buddies I have my fridge door martini. I just like stand in the refrigerator and mix the ingredients together, stir it up real quick, and it's something to just take the edge off. But I do like bourbon. I have a lot of bottles that are collecting dust because
What's your
again,
favorite bourbon?
I think I really am a fan of the Colonel Taylor, they call it. Everybody
Mm.
calls it Colonel Taylor. It's one of the higher end Buffalo Trace options, and I have a bunch of different ones from the single barrel to the small batch and stuff. I think that's probably my favorite generally accessible bourbon, but I don't use that to mix drinks. I sip that if I'm gonna just want something neat. For making drinks, I've been really enjoying Wild Turkey 8. They came out with an 8-year version of Wild Turkey. You can pour it on the rocks. It's like a $50 bottle. Pour it on the rocks, or make an old fashioned with it, or some other kind of drink with it, and you don't feel guilty about spending a ton of money on an overly expensive whiskey. That whole whiskey industry is about to pop anyway, and so it'll be interesting to see the really good stuff kind of flooding the marketplace again. But yeah, I like a drink, as you know.
Yeah. Awesome.
Not today. Coffee
It's
this
too early in the
morning.
morning for that, but
Too
Adam,
early for bourbon.
thank you very much for doing this, and I think that the listeners will definitely get something from your story, and I think that people considering a sale need to hear what you had to say, and I think you were honest, so that was great. I appreciate all your time, and I appreciate you
Thanks,
doing this,
Jerry.
Adam. And you're a great client as well, and it has been fun watching you succeed. It really has been. So
Thanks.
awesome.
Thanks, buddy.
Talk to you.
Good chatting with you.
Thanks.